There we go. And we can use that. We'll be posting that later on. And Sue, I think you were going to kick us off, as I recall.
Well, thanks everybody for taking an interest in tax abatements. I'm going to give a brief background on how the Cincinnati Educational Justice Coalition got involved in this issue before turning it over to Representative Cedric Denson, who's the coordinator for CEJC now, and Michelle Dillingham, who is the CEJC founder. The Cincinnati Educational Justice Coalition's mission is to support and strengthen public schools. So in about the year 2018, we did a deep dive trying to better understand all the complicated ways that developers were benefiting from the various tax abatement programs. And we found many ways these abatements negatively impact Cincinnati. Our tax base is impacted. We don't have the tax base we could have. And this results in less money for Cincinnati public schools. And there's other consequences that range from more levies being needed to support things like the zoo and mental health and the schools, and there's many others where we have to, like libraries. Then there's also tax advantages for the wealthy homeowners that don't really need it, even though one of the big selling points for developers is they won't develop if they don't get tax abatements. This has been repeated 10,000 times over the years, and it's become a mantra, almost taken at face value, that without tax abatements, the developers just won't do what needs to be done to make our city more livable. Now, the idea of livability is a values issue. And that's one of the problems. Tax abatements can be interpreted many different ways, depending on your values. If your values are, you just want wealthy people to live in your community and have this pristine kind of image, then maybe tax abatements make sense to you. But if your values are that you want a diverse community and you want strong public schools and you want parks that are available for everybody, you want transportation that meets the needs of all levels of the income spectrum, if you want low-income housing, if you don't want to run the low-income people out, then your values are in contradiction to tax abatements. So that's our values. And because of that, with the leadership of Michelle, we got really deeply involved in this about 2018. And we learned that City Hall is pretty much run by the money, and tax abatements get passed on emergency basis with hardly any accountability. But we kind of made it an issue. And I think we're successful in educating the public and getting people to understand the issue. It's a very complicated issue, of course. They make it complicated for a reason. Anyway, we're going to try to unravel some of that tonight. And Michelle and Cedric, I'm going to turn it over to you so you can get more into the details.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we decided that I would go first for a few minutes and punt it over to Cedric to wrap it up. It's great to see all of you familiar faces. We have brought this issue before this group a few times over the last several years because it is so really fundamental to good government, I think, which is the use of tax dollars for the public good. I just want to preface my remarks to say that we just eliminated 143 positions at Cincinnati Public Schools due to lack of funding. We had to get rid of reading specialists. We got rid of a few counselors in some of our big high schools. So this is not some intangible. These are real dollars, real numbers, kids really losing core education services. And that's why we care so much about this. And so let me just give a quick rundown. While Sue did say it's complicated, it is not out of the reach of understanding, right? And so let's just break it down very simply. So state law allows municipalities to exempt property taxes if the school board is okay with it. And that's how we have the city and the school board has entered into agreements, but it's only in the case of commercial abatements. The big example is FC Soccer Stadium, for example. If you may recall, the school board, Jeff Birding had to come to the Board of Education to get tax exemptions for FC before he even went to the city. And so, but in the case of residential, now these are single family homes or units up to 4 family a unit, condo units. State law is silent on the issue, meaning they do not require the Board of Education to be okay with losing or foregoing tax dollars. Now, remember, in Ohio, we are one of the biggest, most heavily reliant states on property taxes to fund public education. So this is a big deal if you're watching school funding. In fact, some of you know that the state of Ohio has deemed the way we fund education unconstitutional 3 times over across over 20 years because it is unfair, right? So depending on the zip code you live in, the quality of your education certainly is fluctuating. So beyond that, so back to residential tax abatements. The city, I'll just give some recent numbers. Starting in 2017 up through 2021, the city granted 1,889 residential properties abatements, exceeding $559 million. So what that means is $559 million would have come into the coffers, the public good, right? Except the city exempted that and said, don't worry about it. Because of this but-for argument, we get that you probably wouldn't have invested unless we would have given you this, which is how this is supposed to work. Another argument. But anyway, so what does this mean? $559 million lost in just 4 years to residential abatements. Now, where does most of those property tax dollars supposed to go? Well, for every dollar, 62 cents is supposed to go to public education, to our Cincinnati public schools. That's about $132 million lost, not landing in Cincinnati public schools coffers. And so that's why we are so big advocates of reform, because that's a lot of dollars that could fund things like reading specialists and counselors that we just had to cut. Now, just to bring us up to today, our semi-newish Mayor Aftab, recently recommended some new reforms to the residential tax abatement program. And of course, our ears perked up because we've been recommending changes in this program for years. When we saw the ordinance, we were, and when I say we, I'm speaking on behalf of the Cincinnati Federation of Teachers, because I'm on staff there, and also with the Cincinnati Educational Justice Coalition. We are a coalition of parents, teachers, and community who care about public education. We were really disappointed in what we saw. On the face of it, it might seem like, oh, they're going in the right direction. They've limited the wealthiest neighborhoods in the number of years that they can get an abatement. For example, Hyde Park, Mount Lookout, instead of a 15-year abatement, now it will only be 8. And they've added some incentives in what they call the lift neighborhoods, like the South Fairmounts and, the poor neighborhoods. But if you really drill down, what we're seeing, the use of this tool is really done by developers where they go into a neighborhood, they buy up, they either do new construction and demolish old houses, or they do renovation, they get this abatement, and then they flip the house and sell it for, you know, $400,000, $500,000. I live in Evanston, and I live on Hewitt, historically African-American neighborhood, but the whole street, we have about 8 new houses just built there, all $380,000 to $400,000 each. This is not the type of housing that regular folks like teachers and daycare workers can afford, right? So the effect of, so the pitch is that, oh, this is good for the city. But what we know and what we see around us is we are losing our Black families and poor families. They're being pushed out. That's borne out by the census data. We are seeing massive gentrification, lots of demolition of historic looking houses. And so the effects go on. So in closing for my remarks, and then Cedric can add to this, we have always offered some best practices around abatements and tax exemptions, because other cities do a lot better job of leveraging their public resources to reinvest in diverse neighborhoods, diverse, both racially diverse and economically diverse. And I think and I said this on NPR the other day, that was what we were hoping with Mayor Aftab and this new council, for some progressive, forward-thinking, creative, innovative ways to leverage our public tax dollars. And all we've seen, unfortunately, is more business as usual, and having developers and the business community in the room advising on policy instead of people like affordable housing advocate folks, pro-public education advocates. And so we pushed back. We had a public hearing. We brought in Good Jobs First, who talked about the national trend of public education really being the biggest loser in these abatements. We made a compelling argument to demand that the city produce an impact report, which they still have not done. They're going to do some public hearings. We see this as a positive. And right now, the ordinance presented by the mayor is now on hold. And so it's really great to be able to share this with this type of group, because you guys are really informed and tuned into this kind of stuff. And I'll just stop there.
Thank you. Cedric.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hey, good evening, and thanks again for allowing us to come on. I think Michelle laid the real groundwork of why this is so important that we pay close attention to it. Oftentimes, as we know, it's very complicated to understand some of the policies that come out of City Hall and what connections can be. We're often always told, oh, the city is one entity, and then you have the school board that has its own function, and people really don't understand that sometimes we end up in these kind of situations that are very, very impactful to the overall way that our city operates and taxpayers are affected. And so these tax abatements have done everything that they've done, but we have got to put ourselves in a position to make sure that CEJC is educating the community on what this really means at the end of the day. What this really means is that developers are continuing to get over, and the taxpayers are carrying the brunt of carrying that bill, which is going to be higher. You're going to hear all kinds of arguments that are coming up, because one thing that I can assure you is that the meeting that we had that had over 100 attendees at that meeting to be educated on this issue, they are scared, which is why they're slowing things up, and which is why they are trying to find a way to make this win. But the reality of it is that they know that once we educate our community on what this really means, they cannot win. This is all pro developers. And so when we look at what we're seeing across our, and the census is giving us the real data, African-American families are moving out, and let's take a real look at what this means. Some of what you're going to hear is, well, it makes your property value go up because an abatement may come on your street or in your area for an assessment that you're going to get from the auditor. But the reality of that means is if your property value goes up, your taxes go up But that abatement that came in that area is the reason that it goes up, and they don't pay anything. And so some people are still being forced out if you're on a fixed income or you don't have the means to make that happen. And so this really affects us. And there's a way to make this work the right way. And so the pressure that we applied by having that meeting and them seeing the number of people that showed up that wanted to be engaged, it slowed up the process. So CEJC really got somewhere with making that presence known. And that was us being re-engaged. That's because Michelle did such an awesome job in making this an issue at the formation of CEJC. But now the reality is that we have got to get back up, and we've got to put on our boots, and we've got to hit the streets again. And we have to make sure that people know that let's not look at the smoke and mirrors of what the talking points of this issue really is. At the end of the day, this means that our children are not getting what they deserve at for public education. And that's a bigger conversation that we're seeing nationally, we're seeing statewide, we're seeing local. We're seeing more and more ways that we are trying to hurt public school systems. And this is a Democratic council that has came in that has promised us a lot. And they even formed some partnerships and relationships where they've done joint meetings with the school board. But this issue was never discussed. And this is one of the most impactful ways that we could have had some very, very thoughtful conversations, but it never was brought up. And the reason I can only imagine that never was brought up because it wasn't a real partnership. It wasn't a real relationship to make sure we were getting something out of the deal. And so the reality is that this issue is going to be something that we have to keep our eye on, that is going to affect everyone, whether you own and or rent. It hits all of us. But at the end of the day, the more and more our schools don't get the money they need to continue to operate at the level they need to operate, as you just heard Michelle say, we are losing specialists, we're losing reading specialists, we're losing counselors. The reality is we're going to end up paying for this as taxpayers one way or the other, because I can guarantee you at some point, the district is going to say, we cannot continue to operate at the way that we've been doing, and we now need a new levy. And so one way or another, everybody ends up paying. But the reality is that this is in council's hands. And I think that is the bottom line of a message that we need to convey. Council can make this right. Council can do something about this to make sure that everybody is getting their fair share and that the school system is made whole. And it's not just the school system. Of course, they get the biggest share of what's going on in this conversation, but it's all of our other social services that we all need to be able to take advantage of. And that's one of the most important things that I would say about it. I really appreciate it. And I think we are here to answer any questions that anyone may have. And I just see Brewster. Hi, Brewster. Haven't seen him in a long but I'm here to answer any questions that anyone may have.
Okay, and Brewster, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it. Cedric and Michelle, great to see you guys, and thanks for raising these important issues. So a couple of questions. One, has the Board of Education weighed in on the pending legislation?
We have very interesting. We went through a lot of line of questioning on trying to understand where this whole issue has lied. What we learned was that the CPS administration and or board had not been contacted about this issue at all, even before this policy was put forward. And as we know, anytime any policy is put forward, one of the first things you do is you find out who are your stakeholders that is going to be affected by this. And there was no conversation had at all before this policy was put forward.
Okay, but it's been out there for weeks now, and has the board discussed this? Have they adopted a position for or against or for certain changes in what's being proposed?
There has been no formal conversation that has come forward in a formal way of any position from anyone. I think a lot of the board members have positions and opinions on this, but as far as the city officially reaching out for this policy, there has been no official.
But what about the Board of Education talking back to the city and saying, yo, we're concerned about the implications of this issue overall. We appreciate you making some proposed changes that moderate the impact on us, but you should go further. And they haven't done that, huh?
Well, I can answer that. So I was at the finance meeting of the Board of Education last week, and the treasurer and the chairwoman, Eve Bolton, was presiding, and they both made public comments that they've not, that what's coming out of the city is not okay, so let me say this. Vice Mayor Jan Michelle Kearney asked the administration to produce a report on what the impact on CPS would be. They gave a paragraph and a half response saying, oh, don't worry, this will cause more home sales, therefore CPS will get more money. It was a completely, it was not a report, essentially. It was, I don't know what that was. It was a paragraph and a half of, so the treasurer and the finance chair both said that the city should do a legitimate impact study of what any proposed legislation that affects the school district, and that has not been done. But there's been no formal demand from the school board to the mayor. This is the mayor's ordinance, by the way, co-sponsored by our council member Reggie Harris.
Well, it strikes me that strategically it would be wise, and I know you're already thinking about this, Michelle, because you're always ahead of me on every one of these strategies, but to get the Board of Education to weigh in publicly and aggressively, because if they don't, the council members will say, well, the board doesn't give a shit. They haven't weighed in yet. So obviously it must not be a big deal for the board.
Well, let's remember, we have relatively new board members on the Board of Education, not to excuse their silence, because we've also been frustrated with the lack of sort of pushback. But let's remember, state law does not give the Board of Education any rights to exemptions of property taxes for residential. And they did state that publicly, that, we don't have an agreement with the city. They can do whatever they kind of want. Of course, in the commercial abatement side, that's not the case. Again, the silence is deafening, and it's a good point.
Well, final question is, what would you guys like to see the county do? They're going to do something, and they're going to do something to make it better. What specifically would you guys like to see them do?
I don't even know if it's about making it better. I think just for the sake of what you all started off by reading a statement of why you all this, I think this is something that we have to look at as policymakers. Okay. And so it's very telling that you have two government entities of elected officials that are doing something that is tremendously impactful, one, to our taxpayers, but two, to the education of our children. The fact that neither party is willing to speak out loud should say some conversation is happening, but it's not happening out loud in public, which is where it stands to be. So that's number one. And I think that's very telling, and it's very important, and that's something that we should all be very cognizant of. It's not by mistake and or accident that this conversation is not happening out loud. And so we have to understand that and know that there are some realities to that. And so what we should really be asking is, why aren't people talking out loud? It shouldn't be this conversation. So as we kind of energize ourselves around understanding this issue, we should be reaching out to council and the school board saying, where is the conversation? Where are the public forums of you all talking together? Everybody's talking at each other. Let's be honest. These are politicians. They know what they're doing. Strategies exist. But we cannot.
It's an election year.
and in an election year. And we cannot let that fall at the wayside. So I just want to insert that in there about why people aren't doing what have or should have happened. The reality is that these are smart people who understand the way these issues go and are put out to the public. And the fact that they have not been talking out loud is very telling.
Could I add something here? I went to the council meeting last week on this issue, and they were reporting that the schools are going to receive $1.3 billion more because they're reducing the number of abatements by 23%. And Also the presentation by the city manager's office talked about how it's trying to get data analysis is difficult because there's so many variables involved. I don't know what those variables are. Anyway, they have a way of making it sound like it's going to be an improvement and that we should be satisfied with the fact that it's not as bad as it used to be. But my question about that line of thinking is we still are giving abatements to people who don't need them. There's people on the east side, I don't know the rationale why you have to continue to give abatements to Hyde Park, Mount Lookout, Oakley, east side of town. I don't know the rationale why that has to continue because it's gone on for so long. These are people who don't need abatements. And I think there's a lot of ways to interpret success. It depends on your values and what kind of city you want to live in and what you think is most important.
Okay. Greg, you had a question?
So Michelle is always my go-to person for tax abatement. So I've got a couple questions for you. One, did you say that Reggie Harris was co-sponsoring this bill?
Yes.
Which surprises me because I thought that's what he ran on was fair housing when he ran for city council. So that kind of sort of surprises me. My second question is, so in working on petitions for city council, I've spoken to 3 teachers and I'm getting not very accurate information. So when you gave your example of the house on your street that would have gotten a tax abatement, let's say, for $400,000, I think they're understanding that there is, and maybe I misunderstood it, that there is no tax now on that $400,000 once they get abated. They still get the tax on the original amount, right? It's just the additional that they're not getting the taxes increased on. So,
Right.
So somewhere along the line, some of the teachers that I've spoken to are saying that, oh, we're against tax abatements because all this tax money is going away.
Well, so there's a house right next door to me. It was valued at like 70,000 because it was vacant. It was tore up. It had been people squatting in it. A flipper came and bought it, renovated it. It sold for 385,000, but the property owner has his original land value and house value frozen, so to speak, at the original sale point. So anything above and beyond, if it's abated, it's forgiven, so to speak, foregone. It is a little complicated. For sometimes people think, oh, it's 100% abatement, I don't have to pay anything. No, that's not the case. It's value, the improved value, whether it's new construction
Right.
or but like
Okay.
to add a third part, but let's not forget the TIF districts that were passed by John Cranley.
That was my next question.
Okay.
So does TIF have anything to do with this?
Yes, it certainly does. Here you have
Okay.
overlaid on all of this TIF districts, which are whole swaths of city neighborhoods where the valuation is frozen at that point of time. We have 2023, the auditor reevaluating all property and any additional valuation, like in North Side, Pleasant Ridge, all those neighborhoods are now shifted into a TIF fund instead of going into the pot, right? The public good pot. A great example of this is right now, as we speak, 3CDC is trying to get a TIF fund for that downtown garage so that they can put a new facade on it. These are public dollars to a private entity so they can charge private parking fees for their own enrichment. I mean, it's
Michelle, would you explain how a TIF fund becomes a slush fund?
well, yeah, because the TIF fund, so public tax dollars are dumped into the pot, and then you have politicians elected who decide where the money goes. Well, in the case of the TIF, it's put into a fund at the city, which then yes, they have to do a public hearing to talk to the neighborhood about the use of the TIF, but in many cases, most people aren't paying attention, or they don't show up, or they don't understand it. Another great example is Pleasant Ridge. We have that developer Smijunas making this massive development in Pleasant Ridge, which most of the neighbors are horrified by how ugly it's going to be and impact the neighborhood. Well, he's applied for the use of their TIF funds in Pleasant Ridge for the infrastructure so that he can build his development for his own profit. Again, public dollars supposed to go for the public good. So that's kind of another topic, but not really. It's connected. And here's the big question mark. How does the tax abatement and the TIF district overlay overall impact school funding and overall impact our neighborhoods? That's the question that we've been asking City Council to answer, and they've not given us an answer. So what I just want to share with this group, the teachers union has just contracted with Good Jobs First to produce an independent report. They've done this for South Carolina, Western New York, Kansas City, and every time they have shown real hard numbers on the impact of per student pupil funding as it relates to tax abatement. So we're really excited for their report to come out. And what City Hall likes to act like is like, oh, this is too hard to figure out. It's a lot of moving parts and there's no way we can really nail any of this down. And it's just not true. We can nail this stuff down. We just need good numbers. And in fact, at the public hearing, there was this massive slide that the Good Jobs First people put up with this huge 20-foot question mark. And he said, I would have loved to present to you some basic numbers for Cincinnati, but I cannot do that because they've not been reporting according to government. There's all these ways that you have to report your subsidies. And Cincinnati's not been reporting on TIFs publicly since 2018. So that was a real zinger, right? So they're not even sharing the numbers publicly like they're supposed to. So this is where we're at with this. We're demanding numbers, we're demanding reports so that we can even assess the impact. And then you craft policy, to just kind of throw up some policy and say, oh, we're going to do this with nothing to inform it. And all we have to do is look around our city. Have you guys driven through Madisonville lately? Do you know how much those units of housing cost? Like a studio is like $1,800 on Wetzel. Who can afford that, right? I mean, look at our area median income of our city. We're largely a poor city. And so this is the kind of stuff that we should be talking about.
Michelle, you had mentioned that there were other cities doing a better job. Were any of those Ohio cities? What were they and what are they doing differently?
Right. Well, so Columbus and Cleveland both have done some tinkering with their tax abatement programs, like the 3-tiered stuff that this Mayor Aftab presented. But there's other cities like Kansas City I'll say Arizona, they have actually outlawed residential tax abatements. California has outlawed residential tax abatements. I think there's some parts of Florida where they're prohibited because, again, the case for letting people not pay their taxes in the name of incentivizing investment, if you can't make that case, then they've said, no, you have to pay your fair share, just like everybody else. So there's other places that have actually prohibited them.
Okay. And forgive my ignorance about this, but I'm sure the state has been, people have been trying to impact the state legislation for some time on this. Is anything happening in that direction right now?
No. The state likes to take a position to push everything on these kind of issues down to the local level to be dealt with. And that's the unfortunate part about it, which is why there's such vague language on why the school districts and these local municipalities just come up with these agreements. It's very vague language. And we're starting to see it even now with House Bill 1 that is actually going to ultimately, we don't have a definitive answer on it, but it's going to also end up in property tax property taxes going up on folks in the state of Ohio. So what we have is a narrative from the State House coming down is we don't want to deal with this. And what we're being told with House Bill 1 that's out right now, where they're trying to put everything back on local governments when it comes to property taxes and how all that's dealt with. If you don't have the money you need to have to deal with anything, then go put a levy on. Go raise your taxes. It's not on us. State House doesn't want to deal with this.
Okay. And Dan.
Yeah, hey everyone, thanks for coming by. I don't really have a question, but yeah, I would like to say when I'm not an activist, I'm a mortgage broker, so I'm in housing every day, and the type of properties, my clients who are buying properties with abatements aren't the type that are need a break to get a place. They are buying $400,000 and $500,000 homes, and there's the incentive, right? And maybe there is some good from that in the areas they're buying or whatever, but it has been so difficult these last couple of years with rising prices, with such low inventory, and to buy your first house, you're at 240, 250. It's really broken my heart that my favorite type of clients to help get their first homes on a modest wage without a whole bunch of savings. The only clients that can buy a house right now, the only people are, people that are getting a lot of help that already come from money, and the abatements are just, you would think it would be a tool to help the people that need it, but no, it's like Michelle, keeps saying, it's to help, people buy a home in a nice new gentrified neighborhood. So thank you guys for, pushing the cause, and, hopefully we can help. So
Great.
thanks.
Thank you.
And
I'll
Greg.
just add for
go
the
ahead.
mayor to say, we're gonna give more incentive to low income neighborhoods. Just because you offer a program does not mean that you're expanding access to that program. Meaning, if I don't have $10,000 laying around to fix my roof or to put on a new porch, if I don't have the capital to do an improvement, then of course I'm not going to do an improvement. I'm not going to seek a tax abatement if I don't have the capital to even do the repair, right? So a lot of the testifiers that came down to City Hall were talking about, hey, if you really want to build generational wealth in Black families in Cincinnati, why don't you do some home improvement, forgivable loan program or why don't you do some first time home buyer stuff, and those are, these are smart people who know what works. And it's really lazy, honestly, of this mayor and council to just throw out this thing and have their talking points be, oh, this is going to solve all these social problems in our city. And we're just kind of like, show us the money, like where? And so just to that point, the next meeting, they produced a motion that said, we heard you, we hear you. And so next budget cycle, guess what? We're going to prioritize home ownership programs. We're going to prioritize, those sort of capital dollars for low income modifications and stuff. And even Liz Keating, Republican, said, you can say you're going to prioritize all you want. That doesn't really mean anything. Everything's going to be a priority at budget time, right? Get some real, commitments on this stuff. And so, yeah, I mean, we've been pretty disappointed.
Well,
Greg,
I think if a lot of people show up at the hearings, the public hearings they're going to have, and it might make a difference.
And when are the next
Know
hearings?
when these hearings are coming?
That's what they promise.
Well, what we're hearing is Vice Mayor Jan Michelle Kearney is probably going to host the hearing on this within her Healthy Neighborhoods Committee meeting, which will be out in 2 different neighborhoods coming up in March. Now that I don't think it's been formally announced, but we're hearing that that's what the plan is to kind of embed the hearing of the public and a presentation on this within her Healthy Neighborhoods Committee that they had already planned that would be out in the neighborhoods. So as soon as we find out detail, though, we can share it.
And
That would be great.
to go into that, again, you always have to pay attention to, not be thrown off by what we're really dealing with here. This issue is not in Vice Mayor Jan Michelle's committee. It is
Mhm.
in Jeff Cramerdine's committee. And so when you look at that, the fact that we've been tossed into yet another committee where this issue doesn't even reside, where this is not even being discussed, you have to really pay attention to strategy and what's going on, which is why the strength of groups like you and you reaching out to your networks and making sure that people understand, hey, what is really going on here? I've never seen an issue land in a committee and then public hearings show up in another committee. What are we really doing here? I mean, there is something that is just really strange going on at City Hall. And when you start seeing these things and you start seeing things slow up because CEJC and all of the advocates that really care about these things show up and make a difference, it really starts to make you scratch your head and say, what is really going on here? We've never seen business like this been done at the city. The reality is they were elected by us and they don't get to make every decision for us. If something comes up where we have an issue and we want to push back and we're saying, let's go another direction, they have a right to diligently go through the right process to listen to that and react to that. And that's the part where we need to make sure that we don't make sure that they feel as though they have the power to do everything for us. We have a voice in this.
All right.
And if we don't insert that now, we end up losing.
And Greg, we have time for one more
I did have a
question.
comment. So I just wanted to echo what Brewster was saying, that I'm surprised that the Board of Education, they have a fiduciary responsibility to the public schools to protect their tax base. Why aren't they raising hell about this or more hell about this? That kind of makes me angry that Moffett and all the other ones aren't doing something. So I don't know, should we be raising more hell with them or?
Yes.
Yes.
You
Okay.
absolutely should. It is more telling. And you have to look, I mean, let's be honest. These are folks that were all endorsed by the Democratic Party who has a lot of strength right now. But just because we say we have Democratic strengths and we all align does not mean that we all get to go along to get along. When something is wrong, we have the right to step up and say something. And as we know, Cincinnati is controlled by something that is bigger called the business community. And we need to make sure that these folks aren't listening to people that aren't listening to those that put them in office. So that is something that is very telling to your point, Greg. We need to make sure and ask the questions, why aren't you saying anything? They are very silent. And this is why they exist. This is why we put them in office. And they're saying nothing. And that is very telling.
I just
Thank
shared
you.
in the chat. I have to log off in a few minutes. I just wanted to thank everyone for the opportunity, and I put my email in there, but thanks. If you see me disappear, that's why.
Thank you. Sounds like we have some advocacy to work through with a number of groups here related to this issue. Thank you very much, Sue, Michelle, and Cedric. I appreciate it very much. I'm going to go ahead and say we close out this session now. Don't see any other hands up. And I'm going to be stopping the video. Thank you all for coming.
Can I just add that we do
Sure.
have a weekly, we have a mailing list that Cedric sends out updates on our work. And if anyone here is interested in getting our updates, we can make sure through Sue or Dan to just let us know that so we can opt you into our regular communications.
Great. Can Sue, you can give us a link to that or
Okay.
give us the avenue to that, what have you.
Okay.
We
Okay.
can work for Sue to make sure that happens. And thank you all so much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Take care. All right. I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording.